Welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you are watching us on our fast-growing YouTube channel, that is called Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is our director of basketball recruiting and analyst, longtime college, AAU, and high school coach. That is Mr. David Sisk. And David, we are continuing to preview the 2022-23 UNC Tar Heels basketball team. We have already done Leaky Black. Today, we are discussing RJ Davis, 6-foot junior guard, 13.5 points a game last year, 3.6 assists, 4.3 rebounds, 19, by the way, in New Orleans. He had 40 steals a year ago. We'll go into some more of his numbers and other stats and interesting things about that part of his game. But David, before I also go into a conversation with RJ last week, what are your thoughts as you just think about RJ Davis and you're looking ahead to this season? What stands out to you when you think about what he's going to provide for the Tar Heels?
He's got a role now and he's comfortable. And I think it was late in his sophomore year. Last year was his sophomore year. It was late the second half, on down in the second half, before I think he ever got comfortable in his role, because, there was this talk going, even while they were playing in ACC play last year, who's the point guard? Is it RJ Davis or was it Caleb Love? And there was that question. And I've always thought it was going to be RJ off the ball or Caleb Love off the ball and RJ on it as the point guard. But, there was still that because, we know Caleb can be ball-centric, out front. He can have the ball in his hands a lot, and then RJ's playing off of it. But as they started playing better, I think that you saw both players get comfortable in their positions. RJ is a point guard, and Caleb Love off the ball at the 2 with the shooting guard. And they started playing to that. And I think that made a big difference in why you saw the improvement. But RJ is, like I said, he's got the feel for that now, knowing how to run a team. Decision-making got better. I think you still, in that, you can't flip the switch totally overnight to where you're playing perfect ball. But I saw better decision-making, and I think that's something for this team to be better. Him and Caleb have to do is I want to see the assist-to-turnover ratio improve, less. I think a lot of times, when they really get it going, they think they can make every play.
Yeah.
And the old saying I go, as a gentleman said one time, he wants to be the groom at every wedding, the corpse at every funeral. And, you've got to know when to – got to know when to back off. You got to know when to go. And if you make 2 assists in a row, don't make that baseball length of the floor pass through 3 defenders and think that you can get everything through, and you don't trust your arm and think you're infallible. So I think that comes with a maturity and just kind of understand. Now you got that role. Now you're comfortable in it. So looking forward, very, very anticipatory to see, how they play this year, how he plays.
You're talking about game management, and that's what RJ will tell you as well. Spoken to him a few times the last couple of months, and he has said game management, sometimes maybe not his exact words, but he's talking about game management. Really pride himself on being the point guard. Last year, you may not have heard him say, I'm the point guard. Now you hear him say, I'm the point guard. He's the quarterback out there. He's a quarterback who could do a lot of things. And what I find interesting, too, when you go back and there have been questions, I'm going to sidebar here very quickly. There have been questions that people were asking me at the ACC tip-off last week about, was that really who they were during the run because they kind of were inconsistent and wobbled around during the season? Or was that just a flare-up? And I tend to think that they were actually continuing to become what they were going to become. They were going to continue getting better, and they did. And I point to the fact that there were a lot of different players that had huge nights in the tournament. And RJ had 3 games out of the 6 that were fascinating to me. Number one, in the opener against Marquette, he had 12 assists. So right out of the gate, I'm the game manager. I'm getting people the ball. We're going to roll here offensively. The next game, 2 days later, they desperately needed him to step up and score in that Baylor game, and he did. He scored 30 points. He had that 3-point play and that shot that drew the foul with about 2 minutes left. That the Tar Heels desperately needed points, and they were having a tough time getting any looks. So he drew a foul, and he got to the free throw line, sank all 3 free throws. Then in the national title game, he had 12 rebounds. He had 7 against Duke in the semifinals. He had 12 in the title game. I'm sitting there courtside in the title game, and he's just taken his manhood to a different level in that game. And I think the fact that he said he's watched the national championship game so many times he doesn't even know what number it is. He knows. He knows that's where he left his game last year and where he wants to pick it up this year. And if he is that guy, David, I think he has a chance to be the engine. We talked about the X factor elements of Leaky Black. I think RJ Davis, even though he's not first team preseason All-ACC like Caleb Love or Armando Bacot, I think he could be the engine of this team, because the guy that was stepping up and doing those things in March is the guy I think that could ignite them for the next 5 months this season.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you may have to go about it different ways. You know, you talked about some big numbers: assists, rebounds, points. You know, the assist to rebounds, he kind of sounded like Leaky, you know, the Swiss Army knife, where he's doing a lot of things. I could see the assist, the rebounds, because he's not a big guy. He's not a thick guy. Yeah, you know, kind of, you know, lean. But I think that goes back, you know, if you play out in New York City, he saw enough playground wars to, you know, that's just old hat to him. But, you know, obviously the ability to do that when you know that you've got a guy, if he needs to step up and score now, if you're Hubert Davis, he can go to that. You know, he can make the assist. He can do all those different things, rebound. But I think one thing, too, stepping up to this next level, we all think this team's going to be better this year, and this team's preseason number 1. And you know, you've got all these aspirations for the team. But in doing so, especially at the point guard spot, there comes an element of trust, to where you trust your teammates. You know, that we trust Caleb now. Obviously, we trust Armando. We trust Leaky. We trust, you know, whoever that other starter is going to be, Pete Nance. We trust him. So as a point guard, you're distributing. You don't have to rush. You've got trust in your team. You don't have to hit that home run. And, you know, that makes a big difference where you're just not having to make a big play. And I think sometimes, you know, as that point guard role, I'll give you Alabama in football, for example. You know, I think they had, you look at them in some game, I think they had 12 penalties against Texas, and they won by 1. They had 4 turnovers against Texas A&M. They won by 2. They had 17 penalties Saturday, which was the most in Nick Saban era. And I was watching TV earlier today, and I saw those numbers. And they're the most, you know, you look at their talent that they have, you know, they're number 1 in recruiting every year, and the talent Alabama football has is immaculate. But they're screwing it up by making mistakes. So what do you say with a team with that talent? Make winning plays, don't screw it up. You know, don't find ways to lose. And I think now, you know, you look at kind of North Carolina with that success, you're trusting teammates. I think that's Hubert Davis can have that confidence that we talked about Leaky Black making winning plays, but the rest of these guys can, including RJ Davis. And the thing to RJ Davis, I think the biggest thing to him is, yeah, you can have those games where you have a lot of points and you have a lot of rebounds. Rebounds are going to be great. The more he can do that, but you know, you're getting this guy's getting his shots. This guy's getting his shots. Everybody's getting a piece of the pie, and you trust your teammates to do that, because if you've got this guy out there that just keeps screwing everything up and he just can't cut it in a college game at North Carolina, well, you're not giving him the ball. But North Carolina doesn't have those type of players on the court. So just like I said, be a facilitator, make everybody happy, and then take these other things, points, rebounds, and assists in increments.
And the dog mentality. By the way, 6 of those rebounds in the title game against Kansas were offensive rebounds for a 6-foot guy against a very long, good rebounding team like Kansas. 16 times last year, RJ had 16 points or more. 5 times he had 20 or more. He had 6+ assists in 7 different games, shot 46.9% from the field, way up from his freshman year, 36.7% from 3-point range, up a good chunk from his freshman year, 83.3% from the free throw line. By the way, that's something that this team does very, very well. He averaged 3.2 free throw attempts a game. You might see that number go up this year a little bit as well. The last thing I want to talk about RJ is defensively and their defense last year at the guard position. They struggled at times, and they did get better, especially when you had, Caleb 6'4", I guess it is 6'4.5", and you have RJ dealing with a lot of guys. Defensively, what did you see out of him over the course of the year? Because at times in the tournament, he was really, really good. And he was a little bit more consistent in March than he was during the regular season.
Yeah, and the whole team was. Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because I was thinking about that. When I got to talking, I said, well, I didn't get the defensive part in. But I remember early on as freshmen, you watch him and Caleb out front, and you go, man, these guys have got a chance to be different type of dudes. They both had some swagger about them. They had the big city swagger. And they had they had the athleticism. Both of them very quick, tenacious. You talked about they had that belief in themselves, and they could get out on the floor and guard people. And you would have thought they could get on the floor and guard people, but then you just look at games the year before and last year, and the things with those teams are well documented. When you look at the Wake Forest game, you look at Miami, you look at Kentucky, those were the worst defensive games that's ever been played in the history of Western Hemisphere. And
that's not really much of a stretch, by the way.
Before, Roy said he couldn't stand it. It just drove him crazy. I know it drove fans crazy, but there were games defensively where it was just the effort wasn't there. And then but the thing I started noticing about the team later on, after I got through some of those games, is that, and even there were some low scoring games, some of the ones that I thought about was the game at Boston College or Boston College in North Carolina. And it looked bad because Boston College wasn't very good, but they defended a little bit that game. They went to Clemson. I thought they defended. They went to Virginia Tech. That was a big one, and I thought they defended. And the stats may not bear everything out, but just the effort, just the eye test and the effort, and then that kind of carried on a little bit. So, the ability's there. I think the attitude's there. Now they can't rest on their laurels. They've got to bring that consistently, but that's what I want to see out of RJ and Caleb is consistent defensive effort and totally selling out to that end of the floor, and not having a game like they had against UCLA where they guarded great, and then having a Wake Forest game.
Yeah.
And then, having a Marquette game where they defended well, and then having a Miami game. So it's got to be night in and night out. And, if they don't live up to that on that end of the floor, they're going to underachieve. If you're going to finish number 1 in the country, or you're going to finish top 5, top 10 and be in that discussion throughout the season, you've got to do it defensively. It's got to be consistent.
And it begins with RJ. And the game that did it for me, and we'll close with this, and you can comment on this before we close it. It was the St. Peter's game. I was right behind Matt Painter, just about right behind his spot for the St. Peter's Purdue game. And I watched St. Peter's run an offense that was very perimeter based, 4 guards essentially, and Purdue couldn't guard them. And they couldn't stop the ball. They couldn't stop the flow of the ball. St. Peter's got into an amazing groove. They were so comfortable. It looked at times like they were almost running dummy offense. Carolina St. Peter's, the Tar Heels did a phenomenal job defending the perimeter in that game, and it began with RJ. He affected the ball, and if you affect the ball, everything else after that is affected. And I thought that as awesome as Armando was that game with the 2020, I think RJ's defense was as important for them getting up on them early and establishing control of that game, and they never let up defensively.
Yeah, and you talked about it starting with RJ, and it's going to start with anybody on the ball.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I think that all coaches want, and a chance for their team to be a different type team is to be able – it's just on-ball pressure. And I think when you have on-ball pressure, everybody else kind of rallies around it.
Yeah, I agree.
So, I think if you're really on the ball and you're up in them, you're making them pick their dribble up, and that next pass is made 40 feet from the bucket, and, they can't get anything in shooting position, and you're making them catch the ball out on the floor. I think when you're up in the ball and you're really harassing that guy, then I think the wings, if they've got any pride at all and you're guarding wings, you're going to get out and deny passing lanes, and you're going to work just as hard. So he's really the guy, we talk about Leaky being a lockdown guy defensively, but the guy who's going to set it initially is
RJ.
Going to be RJ, because It's almost like in football where it's the pass rush. If you want to stop the passing game, the rest of those guys are kind of in secondary. He's the guy trying to make a very muddy pocket for the quarterback and quick throws, and you don't want the pocket clean. And then that's up to RJ.
He's David Sisk. I'm AJ. Make sure you join us for our next one. We're going to continue previewing the Tar Heels because the 2022-23 season is almost here, everybody. So make sure you come back and check us out for our next one. Thanks for stopping by.